Okay, so I already made a video talking about the most pathetic enemy in the game to me based on its AI, but for this video I want to talk about what I found to be the worst enemy in the game. I mean an enemy that is so poorly programmed that I was literally shaking with anger at what the developers had done. Again, I don't judge an enemy by how well it can deal or take damage, but rather by their AI and the mechanics of their moves. I will often screw around with an enemy to science out their attacks and get a better understanding of them. This bitch right here. The way this enemy is designed is intended to be fought as a duel. With that in mind, allow me to very carefully and thoroughly go over all the mechanics and nuances of this enemy's moves and how you as the player are to deal with them, to better explain what I mean by this being poorly designed. One of the core mechanics of the game is knowing when to hit your enemy. After the enemy has done an attack, they are in a vulnerable state where you are meant to hit them with a sword skill. Doing so will put them in a weakened state that will render them immobile for a short time and cause them to take extra damage. Timing it so you weaken them with the first hit of your sword skill will even increase the damage multiplier by an extra bonus amount. Now, for this opening move, watch very carefully and take notes. This attack should be easily recognizable to anyone who plays the game, and even some who just watch videos of it. It's Snakebite, the one-handed sword's AoE sword skill that hits twice and causes slowness. This can be used by other enemies as well, such as skeletons. After they've used the move, they're vulnerable for about a second, which is your chance to strike. However, watch this. Notice how I just rushed in with double circular and struck her with it before she finished her second strike of Snakebite. And notice how it made her weak. In any other circumstance, I should have been hit by that second swing, but it turns out that that second swing doesn't actually exist, and in fact you have to strike her during that second swing to make her weak, or it won't work and you'll be likely open to a counterattack. This is completely different from any other instance that Snakebite is used, and is counterintuitive as it goes against lessons that the game has already taught the player. Another thing I want to mention is the parrying aspect of duels. It's not necessary to parry, but her attacks and sword skills can be parried. This enemy has 3 melee attacks. One is a basic attack, another is the Snakebite that you just saw, and the last is Horizontal Arc, another sword skill. If you want to parry these, you're gonna have a bad time. Notice how fast her attack came out. I was ready for it, and still you see the flash of green on my shield, indicating that I parried at the last possible second, which is called a just parry. It's not only her basic attack, but you'll notice her Snakebite also activates incredibly fast. This, again, is inconsistent as other enemies who use the same sword skill will have some kind of wind-up to warn you of the move in order to give you some time to process it and act accordingly. Here, in order to parry either her basic attacks or Snakebite, you need to hit the parry button by pure twitch reflex. This requires you to immediately hit the parry button the moment you see her start to move, as you aren't given the time to analyze what move she's doing to react accordingly. Simply, if you don't hit the parry button the moment she starts to move, you will be too late. This in itself is not great design, on top of the fact that it makes her Snakebite inconsistent with other enemies' Snakebites, but what you're about to see next will further show how bad this is. This is her Horizontal Arc attack. Notice how this attack actually has a wind-up to it before it executes. That's how the enemy's sword skills are supposed to work. Regardless of the game, all incoming damage must be both predictable and preventable. Even hard games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne follow this rule. This move follows that appropriately, as it gives the player reasonable time to assess what is happening and decide what action they want to take to avoid it. However, its other 2 attacks create a huge problem with this concept that clashes with this move. This attack has a wind-up to it, so if you want to parry it, you need to delay your input until before the actual strikes come. But remember how the other 2 attacks require you to hit the parry button immediately without taking any time to assess what attack is coming, because otherwise you'll be hit. That turns parrying an enemy like this from a rewarding test of skill to a game of pure chance. It doesn't test the player's abilities in any way, and there is nothing the player can learn from it. However, I'm not done yet. Take a look at this. I wait for her to finish her attack and then strike with a sword skill to make her weak. This is a core mechanic the game is built on, and her Snakebite violates that entirely. Again, it doesn't test what the player has learned because it doesn't utilize the mechanics it's established, and only serves to cause the player to doubt the consistency of those mechanics further on in the game. This is something every game should steer clear of. In Donkey Kong, the bananas will never steer you wrong. After many games, they've learned that if they place a banana in a place that would cause the player to die trying to get it, the entire game would fall apart because the player wouldn't be able to trust its core mechanics. Again, here you see me wait until after she's attacked to hit her with my sword skill. Every move of hers follows this rule except for Snakebite, and inconsistency in game mechanics and functions is bad by design, because one could claim that there is no design to begin with. If a game has mechanics that behave with seemingly no rhyme or reason that the player can't trust, it hurts the core gameplay. However, the biggest bullshit is yet to come. Watch closely. So does anyone want to take a stab at what hay-filled horseshit that was? That was an AoE attack that, if it hits you, will freeze you. It doesn't do much damage itself, but it does guarantee you to take another hit. And again, it's not about the damage dealt, it's about the mechanics of the attack. Let me go into those mechanics. First off, I can't emphasize how fast this attack is. I literally did the input for a backstep the exact moment she made that sound for her move. I could not have done it any faster unless I did it preemptively. Yet it was still a perfectly timed backstep, meaning I did the backstep at literally the last possible second before I would have gotten hit regardless. What does that mean? It means I had to dodge that move with an exact backstep by sheer twitch reflex, and that's taking into consideration that I knew that was going to be your next attack. Knowing the attack was coming and having my finger ready on the backstep button to hit the moment she made any indication of the attack, my dodge still came out at the last possible second. There is no special trigger to this attack either. She'll use it if you're in front of her or behind her, near or far from her. Also, it can't be parried, so she has two attacks that require you to twitch parry without thinking about it, one attack that requires a timed parry that you have to give a moment to consider, and another move that you can't parry at all and you have to twitch quickstep through the instant she shows any sign of doing an attack. Does anyone else see the problems with this? Her moves, and what the game requires for me to deal with them, all clash with each other and, as I said before, create an unintuitive experience. You have to be in the mindset to twitch react to her moves, but one of them you're not supposed to twitch react to. But you have to if you want to parry the other moves, but if you try to twitch parry those moves, the delayed attack or instant AoE freeze will get you. It becomes a complete guessing game and is not a fun experience. Snakebite also activates so fast that you have to do a twitch quickstep away from it the moment that you see her start it in order to just avoid it with a perfectly timed backstep or sidestep. That is how fast it activates, when any other instance of the move has some kind of tell to it. On top of that, her Snakebite has gross phantom range that extends far beyond the visual hitbox of the attack. Of course, you don't have to parry these moves at all, and in fact you'll have an easier time not fighting her like a duel. The point is that it's how she was designed, and she simply doesn't work in that intended way. She's actually pretty easy to kill. Here you can see an instance of what I mean about only the first hit of her Snakebite actually counting, because here you saw my model got stuck inside of hers when I tried to use Veiled Rider, so Veiled Rider just kick-flipped me in place, which is another problem that I have with this game because that's not how the skill is supposed to work. But anyway, Veiled Rider has invincibility frames, so when I framed through the first hit, the second one didn't damage me either because it doesn't count, so I didn't take any damage. But again, I'm speaking in terms of the mechanics of her moves in relation to how the game is established you are to deal with them. My playstyle of initiating fights with sword skill chains and using Veiled Rider to dodge away from attacks in the middle of that chain and strike back to make the enemy weak isn't a common playstyle apparently. It absolutely wrecks her and everything else, but I could see others having trouble with her. She doesn't do much damage to me as she hits, but she could deal lots to others, and her attacks and the mechanics behind them are cheap, plain and simple. And the problem I really have with this is that with this kind of design and how it makes players interact if they try fighting her while utilizing mechanics the game's taught them, it says to me that there wasn't much thought put into it and that I don't think a courier really tested it. It's evident in how they handle the DLC as well, and continued adding update after update to fix the damage their last update would cause. The DLC introduced monumentally stronger enemies to the game, ones that would make enemies in the main game seem like Raditz compared to Frieza. Sure, other games have had DLCs with stronger challenges, such as Bloodborne and Dark Souls, but it was still manageable and didn't change the game or the player drastically. Hollow Realization's DLC introduces enemies who are literally hundreds of times stronger than the HMs of the main game, though not necessarily changing the AI of reused enemies. They just beef up their stats. It's like a completely separate game. To balance this, the devs introduced many tools to make the player monstrously stronger in return. You saw me use one of those tools in 3 videos in the past called Attacker Skill Fusion. It made me so strong that I re-downloaded an old version of my save to get rid of it, because it killed the gameplay of the main game for me. Once you prep yourself for the DLC, there's no going back. The power it gives you destroys the base game. Ironically, when those tools were meant to try to balance the game, instead it only serves to rot the game at its core. They could have avoided this by still making enemies in the DLC stronger, but more reasonably so that the player in turn didn't need or wasn't able to get insurmountably stronger to match it and therefore destroy the balance with the rest of the game. Playing Bloodborne or Dark Souls DLCs will make you a bit stronger and more experienced due to facing harder challenges, but it won't ruin the balance of the challenges the main game provides in the process. The devs sacrificed their main game in order to add as much as possible to the DLC, putting all their eggs in one basket basically. It seemed like things were fixed, but when players returned to the main game, they noticed something wrong immediately. It's baffling to me because these are the same people who made Hollow Fragment. And while it had its issues, I consider Hollow Fragment a masterpiece of a game. There was also extra harder content added to that game as well, but it in no way changed at all how the game was played or ruined the rest of the game in the process. I really thought they knew what they were doing, but then I look at all the issues with Hollow Realization and see them as a vastly incompetent development team. That's not to say I, or probably most watching this, know anything about the technical nuances of game design, but I'm pretty sure that if we knew someone who had the knowledge and tools to do it, we could collaborate with them and give them ideas for enemies in combat that's both fair and intuitive, especially if we play a game like this and can spot when something feels wrong and pinpoint what it is and why. And I mean, I dealt with this enemy flawlessly here, but that doesn't make her well designed. Lauren Darkbeast is a notorious boss in Bloodborne because it's large and fast, and the camera is terrible at dealing with it. It highlights just how bad the camera is, yet against Ludwig of the DLC, who is another large and fast beast who is in fact much stronger than Lauren Darkbeast, the camera pans and zooms out perfectly so you can keep track of both him and you and see what's going on. That said, the first time I fought Lauren Darkbeast, I perfected it with seemingly little trouble, but it's still a bad camera. Aquaria, at least in this game, seems to have trouble really grasping true balance. Like I said, I screw around with enemies all the time to see what their AI is like. If it's not something as cheap and horseshit as this, then it's this. Both are poorly designed, but at least the last two examples aren't frustratingly bad, they're just embarrassingly bad. Anyway, this is what I consider the worst enemy in the game so far and why. If anyone is genuinely having trouble with it, and I could perfectly understand if you are, then maybe this breakdown of her moves can serve as some kind of guide. She will usually start off with Snakebite, 2 normal swings, horizontal arc, 2 more normal swings, and then use her freeze AoE, but like with everything else in this game, nothing is consistent.